I mistakenly sat in my sister-in-law's sable chair at a family gathering. Her face turned red with anger when she saw me. She slammed on me, glaring, and without a warning, she slapped me hard across the face in front of everyone. The pain in my cheeks was caused not only by the slap, but also by the humiliation of it happening in front of my entire family. I was surprised when my brother Merrick, who I always thought would back me up, decided to side with her instead. In that instant, something inside me broke. I contacted the police to report the incident because I wanted to get revenge. Something unexpected occurred just before the police arrived. Something that completely changed how I saw the situation. My name is Lyra. I'm 32 years old and work as a marketing specialist in Fort Worth, Texas. The city has always been a favorite of mine because of its bustling streets, vibrant art, and close-knit community that makes you feel like you're part of something special. I have a cozy apartment here, and my job keeps me on my toes. Even though I'm proud of my work, my relationship with my younger brother Merrick has always come first. Growing up, I had a lot in common with Merrick. I had always wanted a younger brother like him, and we spent a lot of time together in our little world, building blanket forts, exploring the yard, and making up stories. As he got older, our bond grew even stronger. I never thought anything could keep us apart, not even when he first started dating. The first person I met was Sable, Merrick's girlfriend. I was thrilled for him. She appeared like the perfect fit for him, funny, attractive, alluring. I remember the day we first met her. We went to a family barbecue. Merrick's face lit up whenever he talked to her, and I couldn't help but smile at him. Lyra, you'll love her. When he told me, he was ecstatic. She's amazing, and that night, Saber kept every promise Merrick made. Somebody was drawn to her for some reason. We shared stories and laughed together, and for a while I thought I had made a new friend. I felt warm and content, knowing my brother was happy with his partner. But with time, things changed. First, I brushed off my uneasiness, thinking it was just me growing accustomed to Merrick being with someone else. However, soon, Sable began displaying a different side from the friendly, compassionate girl I had first met. At family gatherings, she would say offensive things. At first, I thought I was being overly sensitive, but she kept saying things that weren't really innocent. One Thanksgiving, I brought my special pumpkin pie, which I had spent hours perfecting using a recipe our grandmother had passed down to us when the dessert was offered. Sobel told me that with a sly smile. I thought I was supposed to bring dessert this year. Her comments embarrassed me in front of everyone, even though she said them casually as if they were inconsequential. I forced a smile as I replied. I could feel the embarrassment burning in my face, but I must have forgotten. As the months went by, her comments only grew more critical. One evening during supper, she looked at me and grinned. If you're single, Lyra, you should still try dating. It might make you a better person. Her comments hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to ignore it and pretend it didn't bother me, even though it ached on the inside. I started to feel more and more alone, as if she were challenging my role in the family. One night, I told my best friend Zemin during our coffee date. Zemin, it appears that Sable is having trouble. Fearfully, I stirred my beverage. At first, I thought she was amazing, but now she's just different. What's different? Zen asked. Watching me closely, her comments seemed to be an offense to me. Even if she says things in jest, it feels like she's trying to keep me out of my own family. I felt a wave of frustration as I spoke. Have you and Merrick talked about it? He asked. I stopped, considering Merrick's devotion to her. I don't want to cause any trouble. He is thrilled to have her. Zamin looked at me gravely. Lyra, in the presence of her family, you ought to be treated with respect and kept safe. Don't overlook this, please. I knew he was right, and I was afraid to confront Merrick about it, but I disregarded it, hoping that Sable's behavior would change. But it didn't. It only got worse. She started to interfere with my relationship with Merrick by deleting messages he wrote me or deliberately neglecting to inform me of family events. I felt as though she was taking me away from Peace's life piece. Next came the day at the family gathering when I inadvertently upset Herb Chair by doing something so insignificant that it made her angry. When I received a slap, I felt like everything I had repressed had fallen apart. I decided that I would not keep quiet any longer. To protect myself and make sure she was held responsible, I was ready to call the police. But before the police arrived, something happened. Something that made me stop and consider rather than execute my plan of retaliation. The saddest part was that I was beginning to feel as though I was losing my brother, and I had no idea how to stop it. After another family meal at our parents' house, things finally got out of hand. I wanted to spend time with my family and make sure everything went smoothly, so I arrived early to help with setup. As everyone gathered, without thinking about it, I found a chair and sat down. Then Sobel stepped inside and paused. She saw me sitting in that chair, and her expression twisted with anger. "I apologize. I'm seated there." She became irate. I blink in confusion. "I didn't know you had a certain location," I replied. Her gaze narrowed and the whole room tightened. "That location has always been mine. You should know that everyone was staring, probably as uncomfortable as I was, and that there was now a hint of disapproval in her voice. Despite my heart pounding, I tried to be calm, experiencing the strain of everyone's focus. "It's just a chair. Sable, let's not worry about this." Merrick was trying to help, but when I urged, "Come on, let's not make a scene," Sable wouldn't give up. "No, Lyra never stops trying to look after me. She always attempts to get my focus." Her accusations struck me like a punch, causing my cheeks to flush. "I don't intend to take anything." My voice was low and uncertain. I just wanted to sit down like everyone else, but before I could say anything more, the tension in the room seemed to explode. This event would change our family's trajectory, and I knew I had to deal with it for Merrick and myself. I felt as though a storm was building inside of me and was only waiting to blow up. After the dinner, things got out of control, and Sable's scathing remarks, accusing me of trying to take everything away from her family, had my thoughts racing. I had always felt loved and supported by her family, who'd been my haven. It felt like it was turning into a battlefield now, but I didn't know why. Merrick texted me later to ask if we could talk. "Sable regrets what happened last night." I let out a sigh, thinking he was maintaining order as usual. I answered instead of saying something caustic. "I'd like to talk too, of course." We met at a park that weekend. It was a beautiful day, yet the situation made me feel down. Merrick stepped forward, looking nervous. "Lyra," his brow twisted in worry, "I'm sorry about what happened last night." "Sable didn't mean for it to go that far," he added, seemingly expecting me to forgive her right away. I stared at him, unable to put into words how I felt. "Merrick, it's not just about the chair. It is what she says and how she treats me. They hurt people." This wasn't a small issue in my opinion, and I wanted him to understand the wider picture. Merrick sighed and his shoulders drooped. "Even though I'm aware that she might be intense at times, you have to understand that she has been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe all of us should just attempt to avoid trouble." I was overcome with disappointment. "Merrick, avoiding it won't make it go away. I don't think she should force me out of your life." I could tell Merrick was conflicted about Sable and me, even as his look softened. "Give it some time," he replied, "and I'll talk to her." Days turned into weeks, but nothing changed. In fact, Sable seemed considerably more antagonistic, especially at family gatherings. One afternoon at a BBQ, Lyra, who was still single, grinned and slid up behind me. "You must have a wide range of tastes." As she spoke, fake sympathy filled her voice. My cheeks were burning with humiliation, but I tried not to show it. "I'm just worried about my career right now, Sable," I responded to end the conversation. "That's correct. You're doing a fantastic job with that." With a giggle that sounded like nails on a chalkboard, she responded. It seemed as if she wanted me to feel uncomfortable and unimportant. Next, I started talking to Zen, my best friend. More and more. I felt lost in this situation and needed someone to help me make sense of it. While the aroma of coffee filled the air, I was distractedly stirring my drink and talking to him about my issues one evening at our favorite coffee shop. Around her, I feel like I have to exercise tremendous caution. I was exhausted, but I told him. She seems to be annoyed by everything I say and do. Zen looked at me with a serious, concerned look on his face. Have you ever thought of looking into her past? He hinted that she might have a reason for her behavior. I stopped. How far I wanted things to go was unclear to me. My mind was spinning with questions, but I knew I couldn't keep living this way. I believed that I was losing my brother and my family as a result of this continuous battle. I felt uneasy looking at the history of disabilities. It felt like a violation of privacy, so I was worried that it might make things worse. Sometimes you need to understand your opponent to defend yourself, Zamin replied. Hearing his steady, forceful voice and sense of resolve, I reluctantly began to consider it. Following a great deal of internal conflict, I decided to ignore my impairment. I soon discovered some concerning information online. Her former partners had filed a few restraining orders against her, and I found allusions to toxic relationships. My heart pounded as I read these details. With whom had my brother chosen to be married? Feeling anxious and determined at the same time, I decided to share what I had learned with 7 other people. It's her past that worries me. I told him this might be why she was acting the way she was. Zen's face darkened as he took in everything about Lyra. You have to give Merrick this information. He ought to be conscious of the people he is engaging with. That evening, I finally mustered up the courage to invite Merrick to dinner. I wanted it to feel like the past, hoping that the familiarity of our lunches together would ease the tension. The moment he arrived, I could see tension lines on his face as if he had been carrying a heavy load. Thank you for attending. Merrick, I made your favorite chicken. Alfredo, he remarked. It smells amazing, and I smiled, trying to lighten the mood by replying, Thank you, Lyra. But I could feel the worry in his gaze. Once we sat down at the table, I took a deep breath, knowing this chat could change everything. Merrick, I have to talk to you again about Sable. As I began to attempt to speak in a calm tone, his look became slightly hazy. I hope we can just let it go, he replied, sounding worn out. I thought we agreed to let things cool down. I nodded. But I discovered some things about her that worry me. It appears that you don't know her well. I shoved forward and tried to listen to my voice. What do you say? As he asked, his face lit up with worry. I told her about the toxic relationships, the restraining orders, and even how she had been interfering in my private life. Her actions have damaged my career. Merrick, she is lying to my clients about me, and I can't let her hurt you too. As Merrick took in what I had said, his expression shifted. This makes him appear torn and a bit overwhelmed. There is a lot to process. Lyra, I don't know what to think. He trembled and started to speak, but before he could say anything more, there was a loud bang on the door. My heart was racing as we exchanged nervous glances. Who could it be? As he asked, a hint of tension crept into his voice. I answered with a nod in my gut. I don't know. I felt as though something awful was about to happen. Merrick pulled open the door. I felt a wave of unease. Sable was standing there. Her features were filled with anger and, startlingly, a hint of panic. My heart sank as she pushed past Merrick, utterly disregarding me. Now, Merrick, we must talk. As she asked, her voice was frantic. Merrick glanced back at me, uncertain. We were in the middle of a conversation, he murmured, and Sable turned to face me grudgingly, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. He's been hearing lies from you. Have you not? Lyra? Despite my racing heart, I spoke evenly. That's not true. Sable, I'm only trying to protect him. She stepped closer and stated sarcastically, You mean keep him all to yourself, right? In a voice full of contempt. I know your type, Lyra. Merrick stumbled out, trying to regain control of the situation. Enough. She wasn't going to back down, but let's not do this right now, Sable. Oh. I think we have to, she yelled. You're too preoccupied with listening to her nonsense to notice what's going on here. I tried not to leave, but I could feel the stress. Remain composed. Sable, I'm not trying to get in the way of your relationship. I just want the two of you to be happy. She smirked and crossed her arms, saying, You can just waltz in and dictate. I refuse to let you control our lives. I'm not trying to control anything, I replied. I was trembling when I spoke. I'm only concerned about the two of you. Sable stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a low, venomous growl. You think you are better than me. You have the perfect life and career, don't you? I'm worn out of it. Her words were rife with anger and hatred. She felt as if all of her suppressed emotions were suddenly surfacing. Merrick gave me a conflicted expression as he looked from Sable. Uncertain of what to say or do, I stood there feeling the tension in every manner and confronting her anger. I realized that this was only the beginning. I doubted we would be able to resolve the widening divisions within our family. I had never thought of myself as superior to Sable. I wanted to help build our family. Sable, I'm not trying to minimize you. I want us to establish a family, I said, attempting to keep my cool as my heart pounded. But Sable leaned into her eyes, fierce and outraged. Family, you jeopardize everything I've worked so hard to accomplish. You've been trying to ruin us since day one. She hissed, and I felt a surge of anger. I've never tried to keep you two apart. My brother's safety is all I care about, I replied. My voice faltered. Before I could finish, Sable's expression twisted in rage. In a sudden, shocking gesture, she slapped me across the face. Her slap echoed through the room and I stumbled back. Merrick's eyes widened in shock at what had just happened. He was astonished and exclaimed, "What the hell?" As I stroked my cheek and felt the sting travel through my body, tears began to well up, but I had to fight them back. You can't just hit me and cross your fingers. I spoke in a voice that trembled with anger and hurt. Sable stepped back, her expression shifting from one of rage to one that almost looked like regret. I had no intention of doing so. Her tone was not sincere as she mumbled, "But you meant it." I eventually lost my anger and blew back my irritation because you've been controlling everyone and everything around you. Merrick looked between us with a puzzled look on his face. Worry and anger. This is not acceptable. You can't treat Lyra this way, Sable, he said hard. I was a little pleased that Merrick was finally standing up, despite the high level of tension in the room. But I looked over at Sable. I could see how completely broken things had become. Her face went frigid and so did her voice. I am done with this, she said. All of a sudden, you think you can come in here and ruin my life? You're already a brat who indulges too much. Merrick shouted, his voice booming. The fact that this is happening is incredible. I thought we could work things out, but you've gone too far. Sable, his voice wavered with anger and disappointment. The weight of the occasion fell on us like a black fog. I realized then that Sable and I were not fighting this battle alone. I wasn't sure if anything could stop the fundamental foundation of our family from being destroyed. My heart began to race as the sound of sirens abruptly filled the air outside. A police cruiser had come up to the house. I tried to understand what was happening, but I felt ill to my stomach. As she questioned, Sable's voice shifted from anger to dread. Merrick turned to her, his face displaying disappointment. He added in a sorrowful tone, I don't know, but it looks like someone must have called about the altercation. As the policeman approached the door, I felt a wave of uncertainty. Everything had gone worse than I expected, and all I could do was brace for what was coming. I realized nothing would ever be the same as the reality of what happened set in. One of the officers cut his expression short. We mean it, ma'am. Someone reported that there had been an altercation. Could you describe what happened? When he asked, he looked directly at Sable. As Sable turned to face the officer, a flash of panic appeared in her eyes, changing her countenance. I didn't do anything, she stammered, her voice trembling. We had just eaten one when Merrick and she got into a furious quarrel. He remarked, "You slapped my sister." The officers exchanged face-to-face glances. Expressions became more serious. "We will need statements from all parties." As I inspected myself, I took a big breath and stated, "That's what one of the officers said. Sable has been acting aggressively toward me for a while. I have written about other occurrences before." I'm making an effort to speak slowly. Merrick looked at me with big eyes that were a mix of disbelief and despair. "Lyra, I didn't want things to go this way. I thought we could probably figure something out." I said, "That's not going to happen," while feeling a variety of contradictory emotions. There was a part of me that wanted to protect my brother. Some part of me needed him to understand the gravity of the situation. As our statements were gathered by the police, I could feel Sable's anger beneath the surface. She looked at me, her voice full of bitterness. "You are destroying my life. You think you're the good sister, but you're jealous." She spat, bitterness shining in her eyes. Jealousy. My heart was pounding in reaction. "I only ask that you tell Merrick and yourself the truth." When we had finished our accounts, the policemen stepped away to talk among themselves. The tension in the room was palpable. While we waited, we were each lost in our thoughts. I could tell that Merrick's face was split between allegiance to Sable and truth. At last, he saw Sable standing there, her hands clasped, her face exhibiting a mixture of anger and terror. While we awaited the cops' next course of action, a wave of sadness washed over me. I never imagined my family to be this way. I had hoped for a sister-in-law who would make us closer, rather than break us up. As I stood there, the weight of the past few months was pressing down on me. I knew there was no turning back. This night had confirmed what I thought to be accurate regarding my brother and his wife, according to the officers who returned to us. I prepared myself for whatever was coming. I didn't think we would ever be able to get back together because we weren't the same family anymore. I stood for a while and spoke to Merrick in a firm but quiet voice. "Merrick, you have to see how toxic she is. I'm a little worried about you." He ran a hand through his hair and peered, torn and uncertain. "I know it has been difficult, but I still love Lyra." The officers returned before I could respond, "Ma'am," and he replied almost pleadingly, "I just need some time to think." "Looking," one of them said. Desperate, Sable screamed, her voice growing louder. "We are placing you under arrest for assault!" "What can't you do? It's just a misunderstanding." She continued to protest as the police cuffed her and began to haul her away. As I watched her go, I experienced a complex mix of remorse and relief. It was a turning point I hadn't expected, but maybe this was the only way forward. I stared at Merrick, who had a pale, anxious face. Everything was holding him down, and I could see it. "The fact that this is happening is incredible," he mumbled, his voice wavering. "I understand that it's hard." I tried to talk to him, but I spoke softly. "But you have to understand that her actions are more than just a trend. You have been deceived by her. Merrick, she has forced me out of your life." The gravity of the situation hit us as the police car drove away with Sable inside, and I experienced an odd, almost final sense of finality, like the sound of a heavy door closing. This chapter's once charming woman had become a chaotic force, and now she was gone. The weeks that followed were hard and challenging. Sable's actions had serious consequences. She was charged with assault and sentenced to 3 years in prison. I saw the toll this took on Merrick. A whirlpool of emotions, including confusion, sorrow, anger, and betrayal, left him reeling. For hours on end, we discussed everything that had happened, progressively identifying the signs of her manipulation that he had failed to notice. As we went through everything, he began to see how much she had affected our family and his identity. In this period, Zen was always there for me, offering comfort and encouragement. His presence made all the difference, and his serene strength assisted me in my recovery. One evening, while we were sitting together in my apartment, he took my hand. "You're very strong, Lyra. I think your self-defense was excellent." "Oh," he replied. His voice is friendly. "Thank you." Zen, feeling I said. Gratitude makes my heart skip a beat. You were crucial to my accomplishment, thinking about everything. What I realized was that I had learned a lot about love, devotion, and the importance of self-defense. I was stronger and more resilient than I could have ever imagined after facing a toxic situation head-on. Observing the Dallas skyline from the window of my flat, I felt renewed hope for the future. I knew I was ready for whatever was ahead since I now had the strength to protect myself and the people I cared about from negative influences. I felt strong, confident, and ready to start a new chapter that was truly mine. I was finally ready to go on. I had life to shape,